President Trump has said the US core strategic objectives in the war in Iran are nearing completion. In a televised address about the conflict, Mr. Trump said that the US was going to finish the job fast. He repeated threats to target Iran's energy infrastructure unless a deal was agreed by the new leaders of the regime. Addressing rising oil prices, Mr. Trump insisted that they would soon be falling, and he stressed that the war he had started would be much shorter than other recent conflicts the US had joined. Here's our North America correspondent David Willis.
In his first primetime address since the war with Iran began, President Trump hailed what he called America's overwhelming victories and said the conflict was nearing completion.
I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing.
Whilst intimating it is open to negotiation, Iran has insisted that no direct talks have been taking place, contrary to President Trump's assertion that the regime is desperately seeking a ceasefire. And as Iranian missiles continued to pound Israel and US allies in the region, there was no word of the potential deployment of US ground troops. President Trump appears to have abandoned his demand for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is effectively blocking this vital waterway, driving up global energy prices in the process. But Mr. Trump no longer believes that's America's problem.
We don't need it. We haven't needed it, and we don't need it. We've beaten and completely decimated Iran. They are decimated, both militarily and economically and in every other way. And the countries of the world that do receive oil through the Hormuz Strait must take care of that passage. They must cherish it. They must grab it and cherish it. They can do it easily. We will be helpful, but they should take the lead in protecting the oil that they so desperately depend on.
President Trump said the Strait of Hormuz would open up automatically once the war has ended. America's allies will be relieved to hear he made no repeat of his threat to pull out of NATO in response to Europe's lack of support for the war. But there was also no word of where the conflict might go from here. The White House clearly wants this conflict to end, but how and on whose terms, the world is none the wiser. David Willis, BBC News.
Our correspondent Lorna Gordon is in Dubai. Lorna, how have the Gulf states reacted to this televised address by Mr. Trump?
Well, you know, the Gulf states are actually being courted with words by both sides at the moment. Donald Trump spoke of not failing the Gulf states, not letting them get hurt in any way, shape or form, while it's reported that a spokesperson for the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said that Iran does not consider its neighbours in the Gulf Iran's enemy. There are, of course, though, continuing missile strikes on these countries. Overnight, the alarm sounded here in Dubai. Saudi Arabia said it intercepted a ballistic missile that was heading to the east of the country. Sirens sounded overnight in Bahrain as well. So there are these words, there are the actions, and then, of course, there is the Strait of Hormuz, that pinch point, that choke point where around a fifth of the world's oil has to pass, and where normally around 140 ships transit through every single day, but at the moment only a handful are getting through. There is that meeting that will take place a little later, a virtual meeting. The Gulf states will be taking part in that to discuss diplomatic measures to potentially open that waterway. But of course, the Gulf states do not speak with one voice, and the UAE is seeking a resolution from the UN, calling on the UN Security Council to take immediate action under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter to ensure safe navigation in and around the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, remember, that would, if it passed, which is, you know, there's a lot of steps before that point would be reached, but would give legal cover for a range of options economically, diplomatically, and using force as well.
How much closer does all this bring to retaliatory strikes of some sort from Gulf states that haven't so far taken such action?
I think they want a diplomatic resolution to this crisis. It is having a deep economic impact on this region, not just on the flow of oil, which would fill the coffers of the governments here and keep the economy moving, but it's affecting the flow of liquefied natural gas. It's affecting the byproducts of these industries as well. And of course, in a country like the UAE, which is heavily dependent on tourism and here in Dubai, the aviation industry, it is having an impact on that as well. I mean, you know, flights in and out of the international airport here have picked up since this war started over a month ago, but they are still carrying on at a vastly reduced level. As I said earlier, they don't all speak with the same voice. I think perhaps the UAE is one of the states which has taken a harder position in terms of ways to deal with Iran, but none of these countries want to see this escalate. They want to find a diplomatic solution to this crisis.
Lorna, for the moment, thank you very much. Lorna Gordon in Dubai. Let's speak to Dr. Patrick Bury, conflict and security lecturer at the University of Bath and a former NATO analyst. Dr. Bury, thank you very much for joining us. What are your thoughts having heard President Trump speak on television?
Good morning. Thanks for having us on again. Well, I suppose when you look at your phone in the morning here in the UK, one of relief that although the chances were small that there hadn't been some sort of movement and committal of ground forces before he made his speech, which would have made more tactical sense. So it's essentially more of the same. He put another time stop on how long he thinks this operation will go on, but it is a significant addition to when he initially said 4 to 5 weeks. So we're looking at now 7 to 8. And just at the end of his speech, when he said this wasn't about regime change, that is not actually what was the stated goal when he spoke on Truth Social when the operation started, when he called for the Iranians to rise up. And also, it was also made clear by the Israelis that this was about regime change. So a kind of attempt to change the goalposts, as it were.
What are his options?
I think the options are pretty difficult here. What you've seen is with the amount of strikes both he and the Israelis have launched, you know, it's probably over about, I think, you know, certainly over 15,000, maybe hitting 17,000 now, that they've had a lot of tactical and operational success in terms of degrading the Iranian military, the ballistic missile launches. They're ticking along at a relatively low number. They increase some days and then down to about 30, 25 other days. But the real problem is so what? You know, that's what we ask in the military. What's your action for? And unless they come out, and it's talking now, Secretary Hegseth talking about and Donald Trump talking about, you know, bombing Iran back to the Stone Age. Well, that implies a level of degradation that they can't regain capacity and capability. But I mean, for us to understand this and for there to be an end state, there needs to be some clarity about, well, how far have they been set back and how fast can they replenish both their missile and drone capacity and also their nuclear program, because you can, well, assume that none of that fissile material has been stored in the same place. It would have probably been dispersed too. You don't do these things in just certain areas. You obviously have a contingency. So it looks like the strategy essentially is one of degradation. And then, of course, the replenishment of that degradation becomes a key thing in understanding its strategic effect.
But eventually you have to negotiate, don't you?
Yeah, I think this is where we're coming to. It was good to hear that he didn't actually call out the NATO allies again. I can understand the frustration in the US, of course, amongst the military of being denied airspace across some of NATO allies' territories. I think that's probably pushing things a bit too far. But yeah, the military side of this, the maritime side of trying to force an opening of the strait along 730 miles of the Persian Gulf coastline, which Iran holds. It's really tricky operation. It's really a resource intensive. I would wonder if you can sustain it in the long term as an option, depending on the kind of threats that Iran can bring to bear over the same period. And so I think personally the easiest way to open the strait is probably through negotiations. But Iran does hold some decent cards as long as it remains capable of firing missiles and drones, especially at these slow-moving ships.
Dr. Patrick Bierig, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Let's get more on the situation in Lebanon with our correspondent Lina Sinjab, who's in Beirut. What will the Lebanese have taken from what Mr. Trump's been saying, Lina?
Well, this is the situation in the south of the country, that they feel they are under a de facto situation of an occupation by the Israeli forces, and that to finish anytime soon. The Israelis made it clear they are here to stay. They are in the south to stay until they eliminate any threat coming from Hezbollah in the north, which, you know, this is like really an elastic statement, because it could last for long time. You know, the Lebanese have lived an occupation in the south in 1982 that lasted 18 years. And now there are still tens of thousands of residents, including Christian villages in the south, that are refusing to leave. They've made it clear to the government, to the Israelis, that they are here to stay. We've seen a priest, announcing that they are there to live or die. They're, eating grass if needed, because Israel cut off all the supply routes from the south to the north by bombing infrastructure and bridges. There are still hundreds of thousands who've managed to flee, but they are, scattered. Some of them are living in tents, waiting to go back home if their homes are still standing. And now they have to face a reality of an occupation that may last for long, especially in the absence of a diplomatic solution to end the war.
Lina, for the moment, thank you very much. Lina Sinjab in Beirut.